Comments by the government's welfare reform minister that some disabled people aren't worth the minimum wage have sparked outrage among MPs and disability charities. The remarks by Lord Freud were in response to a question and were recorded during a meeting at the Conservative Party conference. They triggered a heated row in the House of Commons. David Cameron insisted his minister's comments did not reflect the government's views. Lord Freud has apologised unreservedly. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, James Landale.
That is how you get lucky.
Lord Freud, welfare reform minister, and today not so lucky.
Hi James, good to see you.
The former banker used to advise Labour. Today he's the brains behind much of the government's welfare reforms. But at the Tory conference 2 weeks ago, he was asked at a fringe meeting if some unemployed disabled people could be helped into work by allowing firms to pay them less than the minimum wage. His response, recorded and given to us by Labour, was as candid as it was clumsy.
You make a really good point about the disabled. There is a group, and I know exactly, they're actually, as you say, they're not worth the full wage. But actually, I'm going to go and think about that particularly.
Labour sprung its ambush in the Commons, where its cold-ridden leader had lost his bark, but not his bite.
He didn't just say that disabled people weren't worth the minimum wage. He went further and he said, and I quote, he was looking at, and I quote, whether there's something we can do if someone wants to work for £2 an hour. Mr. Speaker, surely someone holding those views can't possibly stay in his government.
Well, those are not the views of the government. They're not the views of anyone in the government. The minimum wage is paid to everybody, disabled people included.
For a man whose late father and son were disabled, this was personal.
And let me tell you, I don't need lectures from anyone about looking after disabled people, so I don't want to hear any more of that.
Mr. Speaker, in the dog days of this government, the Conservative Party is going back to its worst instinct. The nasty party is back.
Outside the Commons, even Lord Freud's ministerial colleagues were surprised.
Right, those words will haunt him. I cannot justify those words, that they were wrong.
And Lord Freud agreed. In a statement he said, "I would like to offer a full and unreserved apology. I was foolish to accept the premise of the question. To be clear, all disabled people should be paid at least the minimum wage without exception, and I accept that it is offensive to suggest anything else." This row matters because welfare reform, along with fixing the economy, is central to what this government is about. Ministers believe that getting people off benefits and into work is popular, but they also know that appearing cruel to minorities is not. The austerity party doesn't also want to be known as the nasty party. Kira, who has learning difficulties and works for a charity, said she was furious.
As someone with a learning disability, I know how hard people with a learning disability work. We all have the right to have a job. We all have the right to be independent, have choice, control over our lives. And it doesn't help when someone makes a negative comment about people with a disability.
But the man who'd first asked Lord Freud about this, whose own daughter was disabled, insisted more had to be done to get vulnerable people into work.
It's been taken out of context. When things are taken out of context, it is somewhat sad because you lose the point of this. And the point is about the vulnerable people, how to support them in society.
Downing Street is standing by Lord Freud and tonight dispatched ministers to defend him.
He's been absolutely passionate about getting more disabled people back into work.
But for all that, Lord Freud will no longer be answering questions in the Lords tomorrow. Another minister will stand in his place.
James, this is a controversy the government could have done well without, particularly on a day when it would be far rather focusing on the more positive job statistics.
Yeah, that's right, Fiona. They have been expecting to trumpet all the good news about unemployment. Instead, they've been defending a minister all day over his clumsy remarks on an issue, welfare reform, where the government believes it has a competitive advantage over its opponents. The ministers are clearly not happy that the whole row has made it easier for Labour to accuse the government of being uncaring in the way it goes about cutting spending. But that said, Downing Street and other ministers tonight are hoping, they're believing that Lord Freud is safe, not just because he's come out quickly and apologised, not just because within government he's a popular figure, seen more as a policy man than a politician, but also because many believe he was touching on a real issue, namely how do you get a small group of severely disabled people into work when employers simply cannot afford to pay them the minimum wage. Now, here's the twist. The controversial policy that Lord Freud briefly entertained, namely that some disabled people should be paid less than the minimum wage, with the rest made up by the state, was a policy advocated by leading disability charities themselves. Now, that debate will not get rid of the damage, but it might temper it a bit.
James Landale at Westminster, thank you.